Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, we are going to be going over the interview that Carve, Mike, and Gazzy had live on stream just recently. So we're going to go through all of the talking points. First things off, though, there was a huge, and I mean huge, data dump of specifically Heartseeker, and of course, a lot of the Sentinel changes. I am not going to be covering those in this video. I'm going to be covering those in their own video, as it is a lot, and I mean a lot of stuff, like a lot of stuff. So we're going to be covering that in their own videos. So we're just going to talk about the questions that they answered and all of the leaks that we have so far from them. First things off, there's going to be huge ward nerfs across the board in general. So like, for instance, there's going to be nodes that give you a lot of ward on hit, like for instance, Spirit Plague, right? Something I've used in the past. This is going to be capped instead of being like an insane amount of uncapped ward. Now it's like actually capped. This is really good because it was really OP before. So good thing that this finally got capped. It was kind of just ridiculous in general. So that's a cool thing. The big nerf change though, overall, is intelligence is getting nerfed as a stat. So it's going from 4% ward retention to 2%. Now, the astute of you who have been playing for a very long time know that it was actually 8% before. So now it's going from 8% to 4% to 2%, or at least it acted like it was 8% because the ward calculation was like nerfed. Whatever. It used to feel like it was 8%. Now it's 4%, and now it's 2%. And it's still insanely strong. Turns out, even going from 400% ward retention to 200% ward retention really doesn't matter all that much. It's still going to be insanely strong. It's just going to be slightly less insanely strong. There's going to be like a lot of other nerfs in terms of ways of gaining ward that are uncapped. The idea of balance for ward versus HP is they're going to be just kind of chipping away at the ward meta and buffing the HP meta little by little. Like for instance, right now, they're buffing health affixes on certain items. Apparently, we don't know the exact things. That's just what they said. They're buffing regen as well. Regen is getting a few buffs here and there, apparently. So that's cool. They say that like regen is going to be a lot better next patch. So hopefully it is. Speaking of that, because of them buffing regen, Vessel of Strife is getting nerfed. But in theory, it will be overall stronger because it should just generate more ward. Now, of course, ward retention is getting nerfed, but you can run ward decay threshold. There's a lot of stuff to discuss that way, but like essentially Vessel of Strife has been confirmed to be nerfed. Now, they increased the health we gain per level. It used to be 8 and now it's 10. Not that big of a change, but it is like a decent amount of HP after a while. Like you go from 800 HP from your levels to 1,000. That is a sizable difference, especially with increased HP, right? They also stated that health pots were buffed by an undisclosed amount. Oh, here's the huge one. Enemies damage over time is being nerfed by 15%. So every single enemy in the game that does damage over time is doing 15% less damage, right? 15% less damage. And then now, of course, as well, corruption scaling. So, you know, the little number on the bar that says like % more damage against enemies or for enemies and stuff like that, that is going to be half effective for damage over time. So not only are they getting a nerf from that, but they're also making it so for damage over time scaling is not as hard. So those void puddles that I keep dying to the harbingers are going to get nerfed significantly. Not only are they going to be dealing 15% less damage, they're also going to be dealing about like a good and less chunk of damage. So that's really cool. Other things, there is a huge thing about like Sentinel in general. I'm going to skip over all of the Sentinel stuff because I'm going to make another video talking about it more in depth and my thoughts on all of Sentinel. But a quick TLDR of it, Electrify support, very good Electrify support from what I saw. The Time Rot support also looked really good as well. But like I said, we'll be talking about it in its own video. Other things here. So they actually teased some item faction changes for the future, not for 1.2, but for the future after this. It seems like as though we're going to be able to actually trade shards and trade stuff like runes specifically in the future. They talked about it a little bit. There are going to be some item faction changes because of that. So that'll be interesting to delve into when that actually comes around. Now, another thing, we kind of knew this, but Boss Ward is going to get removed from most enemies in the game. It's going to stay for the pinnacle encounters or for like the big bosses and stuff like that. So they're going to remove it for everything except for like the big guys and like maybe campaign bosses, stuff like that. Anything that would be called an important fight. So Harbingers are probably still going to have it. Campaign bosses are going to have it. But that random Wingari Patriarch in your monolith is no longer going to have ward bars, which is good. So speaking about Boss Ward, there's been a lot of talk about Cole, like kill threshold, being kind of useless because of Boss Ward in general, because now you just chew through so much HP and that like kill threshold just doesn't really help you at all. This was intentional. It was really overpowered before, so it's good to see that like kill threshold isn't as strong. But now my problem with kill threshold is like it's in this weird spot where it's either really good or it's really bad. And right now it's really bad, and to the point where like I don't really see its functionality outside of some very niche cases. So there was a lot of waffling in general about Endgame in terms of corruption and corruption scaling. So they talked about this at length. I'm going to boil it down to 300 corruption is still being used as the quote unquote metric for Endgame, right? They said that instead of changing how they feel corruption is scaling, they're just going to be nerfing outliers in terms of builds. I don't really agree with this much because right now, as it currently stands, when it comes to farming favor, your favor farm doesn't really explode until like you're doing like 700 corruption, 1,000 corruption. If you're at 700 to 1,000 corruption, you'll be farming way more favor, like significantly, than someone who's at much lower levels in terms of corruption. And of course, if your build is just better, it'll be farming faster. So there is still that kind of thing in the background where favor farming is just really meta progression, right? So we'll be talking about that in the future date probably. Now, yeah, like I said, favor farming meta not really addressed whatsoever, which is unfortunate, but you can't have everything, right? Now, more stuff. Normal monoliths. The normal monoliths you do all the way up to endgame. Those are shared by your alts, like your alt characters. They are shared, right? That means that pretty much every, like, they're just shared between every single character with the same stash. So when you make a new character, your progression on those monoliths are shared, so you don't have to do them anymore, other than like 190 monolith to kill a harbinger. This is really good for efficiency because now you can just like sit in an arena echo and like AFK and kill monsters and level up and stuff, and then move to the next one, yada yada yada, and or maybe even use woven echoes in theory if there are any good ones for XP farm, right? So that's cool. That's really big, by the way, for alts. So alts plus that, plus the mastery spec is going to be huge for alt rolling. I'm going to be able to like actually make content at a much quicker pace because of this. Now, new woven echo that we don't know about, but like we know what it does. We just don't know what it is. It's the idea is you do it and it will catch up your entire, like your character to your stash's shared corruption. So for instance, if you have a character that had 1,000 corruption, right? And then you level an alt and you get it to empowered monos and you do this woven echo, you can boost that character up to 1,000 corruption as well. And this is only within the same stash. So like if you're like in soul character found, this won't work, obviously, right? But that's really cool. We don't know what the woven echo is, but we know what it does. So there was like a whole spiel talking about melee being good, being bad, all this and all that. I'm gonna save this for its own video, in my opinion. Like there's so much to talk about with this little microcosm of what they talked about that I feel like the short rapid fire nature of this video is just not good enough for that. But they did showcase a volatile reversal a little bit. I will talk about that a little bit, mainly because from what I'm looking at so far, it looks garbage. Now, obviously, it doesn't need to be what it was before. I get that part, right? It's not supposed to be insane. But what I'm talking about is seeing the actual Sentinel use volatile reversal is probably one of the worst feeling animations I've ever looked at. Like, it looks so slow. Dare I even say it looked like playing like Rolling Slam from PoE 2. And if you've ever played Rolling Slam from PoE 2, you know damn good and well that like that looks awful. So I'm not really happy with the changes to volatile reversal in terms of the whole rework. Like obviously we're going to lose the whole skill, but the new skill we got just, it has some really good utility. Don't get me wrong. We'll talk about that later, but the skill itself, the animation is just really just awful. It just looks like it takes forever for your character to do it. And I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. Like, it just doesn't look good, but we'll see, right? There's a huge forged weapons buff. There was a nerf in regards to, of course, the forged weapons ring, and that has been fixed. But to compensate for that, forged weapons got a gigantic buff apparently in terms of numbers and everything. So that's going to be cool to see in game. They didn't give us specifics, but essentially what they said is if you weren't abusing the bug before, it's going to feel significantly better. So that's cool. Mana cost reduction for zombie has been confirmed for summoning zombies. That's really good because that'll make summon zombie actually more interesting, especially as well. You can scale with cast speed more. That'll be interesting. I don't know how that's going to go, but mana cost reduction for zombies is going to be great. Summon bear is getting a node that gives it like extra melee flat damage per strength, I think, or it's either more melee. They weren't very specific, but it's going to get more melee damage per strength either way. And the swipe portion of Summon Bear got buffed in the way that I wanted it to get buffed. Now it has a much lower cooldown on its swipe, meaning it's going to use it way more often. So Summon Bear might actually be a usable skill in the future. So that's cool. There was a very... so Gazzy actually contacted me to ask me my questions about the next... like we were talking about like... yeah, like we were talking about how like you know, minions and stuff. We were talking about minions and all that, and like melee minions not being able to farm favor well. Like minions are just in a really weird spot where like they're really good for like killing bosses, but they're really bad for farming favor, like really objectively bad, to the point where I haven't even played minions recently because they're just that bad. They just feel that bad to play, especially if you're trying to actually, you know, meta game a little bit, right? Let's put it like that. And they didn't really answer that question about the favor farming stuff, which is unfortunate. So I guess I'm not going to be playing minions in the future for a while, I guess, but that's fine. All right. And the last one is there was kind of a mystery about a scepter that's coming in the next patch. I think it's either a scepter or a mace. It's like this spider mace, and it was like applying spiders on hit, but we didn't know what spiders on hit was. But apparently it's just 5% base crit per stack, like crit vulnerability or acid skin. So that's huge for minions. That's going to be a best in slot item for minion builds in general, having access to even more base crit for your minions. This means that like summon volatile zombie might actually be a good endgame skill for just itself, like scaling its own damage, right? That might end up being very good. So that's really cool to see. Specifically for stuff like golems too, because if you're to play like a bunch of golems, they didn't really have a good way of getting a bunch of crit on them and stuff like that. There's like a few different things that like it's gonna buff. But that's going to be it for this specific video. This is just a recap of all of the questions that were answered and all the leaks and stuff like that. We will talk about the Sentinel stuff, and we will talk about Heartseeker in its own video. I plan on making that tomorrow. So with all that being said, this has been Dread. I'll have to go do something else. Bye.